taking the arrow out of the heart should be the new motto for the world, I think. I wanted to start with the question and the idea of why you needed to have this book in your time in life, in your relationship with the world. Why this book right now?
Because I think planetarily we have an arrow in the heart. This is not Cupid's arrow. This is the arrow of absolute awareness that we may well be in the final days or years or decades of our planet. And also that we connected now so that we can see all parts pretty much of the world. And we see the suffering. And we have to find some way to allow ourselves to deeply, deeply feel the arrow that is going in our hearts because we are aware. We cannot see the things that we now see without having the arrow. I mean, it's just impossible. Unless you don't have feeling at all, then there are people, of course, who are like that. But hopefully not in this auditorium.
Well, much of your work, including this collection, goes into depth with the idea of the human in all of us. And I think as time goes on, all the threats that we have, do you feel the idea of human has become diluted? Have we diluted it in what we do with the world, what we do to each other? And is it harder to write when you feel the humans are more diluted, if you feel that way?
Well, I'm very fortunate that I keep finding them. I find people who are living fully in their humanity. And actually that means often living not in this country, because sometimes I do despair here. I feel that the greed, the need not to be aware is so strong that people live as if it's okay to live the way they're living in often such separation, you know. And yeah, I think we are losing a lot, and yet I feel very encouraged by every little effort that we make, and I see a lot of those efforts being made. I so cherish and champion people who, no matter how large the opposition, will still stand up to it.
Thank you. Do you feel your audience changes with each book you do?
I don't know. I have no way of really knowing. I can only hope that whatever I'm writing will be some comfort, you know, or some encouragement, or some help and awareness. As I was saying to my friend on the way over, that some people just refuse to be aware and how tragic it is. And I'll give you the example that I gave to her. I'm publishing my journals soon, next year or so. And that meant I had to go back and read them. And I discovered that I had actually queried 4 quite prominent African-American male writers about Zora Neale Hurston. And I'm sure many of you are aware of her work. I hope so. But anyway, they really, to a person, and this was amazing to me, they all said with great, equanimity, I haven't read her. And these were people who help us, who are supposed to be helping us to understand ourselves. And it's the same thing you get where you'll give, a man a book that a woman has written, and the man will say, well, I'll give it to my wife. And I'm just here to tell you that if that's going to continue, we can't go anywhere. Because it's an ignorance that is deliberately maintained. And it's really deadly, because unless you know what the feminine is thinking, unless you understand what the feminine is feeling, you will never understand what is happening to the planet in a way that makes you help really change what is happening.
Well, speaking of different audiences, I mean, one of the things that just reading your books over the years and reading your poetry, many of the key characters in this book are men. And the question of how you're writing about men, Black men especially, which for me I think is one of the greatest triumphs in your writing, is wanting and willing to write about Black men and their relation to Black women, their relation to the world. This writing about Black men has also produced some of your loudest critics. I want to ask you...
But remember, they don't read women writers.
There you have it.
Yeah, I'm afraid you do.
But I want to ask you about these Black men, Muhammad Ali and Jesse Williams and Julian Bond, and because some of these poems are ode/love poems / like you are imperfect and beautiful and you were really good about telling people about themselves. And you speak a certain tenderness to these men that you write about in this book. And has your writing about Black men changed over the years? So if we go back to something like your work in The Color Purple up until this point, and that array of writing about Black men, do you feel it's changed based on you and based off of the commentary that others have said over the years?
Well, let me just put it this way. My very first book was a children's book called To Hell with Dying. And it is about children, and it's really about me and well, what happened was, I was at Sarah Lawrence, the poorest student there, and I couldn't go home to the funeral of this old guitar player that we all loved. And so instead, I wrote this story, which Langston Hughes decided was wonderful, and he published it, and then it became a children's book. And it's about, basically, it comes out of not being able to go to his funeral, and I'm just the story of what this man meant to my family. So that is, it should be the beginning of people's and men's understanding of my perspective of having lived in a community where not only did I have my parents, my father and my mother, 5 brothers, innumerable uncles, cousins, everybody. That actually means that you can write a great deal about many different kinds of behavior and still love everybody because you understand that you're totally a part of it. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't start with The Color Purple. That's my 3rd novel. Mm-hmm.
But I just noted that as one that has often come up with in terms of talking about your relationships and how you write about Black men.
Mm-hmm. You're right, but again, I have to say, I really wish our brothers read more. And I really wish they read with depth and compassion and a real ability to see that art is something that helps us grow. It doesn't have to be pretty at all. It just has to be useful, and it has to add something to our understanding of life. But if men take up, not just Black men, but men in general, out of this kind of masculine sense that they don't have to know more than they do. But if they have this attitude, it's impossible then to actually grow. I mean, there's just no way you can do it. So my sorrow about the response to The Color Purple from some Black men, not all of them, was just, how can you see something that is so obviously devoted to the community? How can you read it? And in fact, I think there is someone in the audience who was one of the few Black men who wrote a wonderful review. And Carl Dix, are you here?
Yes, I am, Alice.
Yeah. Hi. Oh, good. Okay. But anyway, so one in 20 men, Black men, could actually encounter this work without feeling threatened and without being abusive then to me.
Well, let me ask you, this is something I'm personally curious about. I'm just gonna tell you, my favorite book is by The Light of My Father's Mind.
Bless
I
your
read-
heart.
I read that book and I was like, I'm done. Sit me down, I have to read anything else ever again. I realized I need to read more. But I want to ask, because obviously, you know, you're known for so many of your works, but The Color Purple is, you know, in a life of its own. I am curious, have you ever thought about what if The Color Purple was released right now, in this time, during all this conversation, all this, all the movements, all the coming, the reckoning, and everything that we're kind of facing with as in terms of gender and race and sexuality. Do you ever imagine, like, how people would respond to The Color Purple if it was released in 2018?
But I've seen how they've responded to it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when it was released. I mean, I think a lot of the ways that people are today happened because they had an example of how you can actually live very differently, and that it was a very huge success in that sense. But do you mean just
If it just was first published
now,
today?
in the same way that it was published then? It's
Yes.
the same story?
Yes.
I don't know, but you remind me of a woman in one of my talks who wanted me to redo The Color Purple. And I said to her, well, how can I do that? And she said, well, you know, all this police brutality, why don't you bring it up to date? And I said, well, you know, there was police brutality back then too, and it's in The Color Purple. I mean, that is why Sophia is in prison in the mayor's house for all those years. I don't know. I don't really think that way. I mean, I don't think about going back and or trying to influence. I really don't. I'm enough involved with my own growth, and I think what happens is that I express what I feel, and I offer that because, you know, that's what poets and writers do. And then if I'm very fortunate, I guess, people respond. But in any case, whether they respond or not, you know, I know what I'm supposed to be doing here. I mean, I really am clear on that. And that's a real blessing, you know, and I know there are students here, and you often wonder, you know, what is your meaning? What is your meaning in this life? And I advise you to sit with that long enough to really try to get it, to understand. Because we do, I think, now there are some people who are just, I would call them meat people. And that is to say that they, I'm sorry, this is like a tangent.
No, go for it.
But the meat people seem to have bypassed that stage where they need to have soul connected to expression. And those are the ones, you know, the other term would be psychopath. So they don't have this, but for many people, still, we're not meat people. We still have a soul, and we're still guided by it, but it has to be listened to. It really does. So when I think about what our culture needs more than anything, it's silence. We cannot grow anymore if we continue with the noise that we encounter all the time. It is harming us deeply, and it's in the quiet that you begin to develop and to understand what it is that you offer, what it is that you were here to do. And I feel that we are here to do something, that we all have our work,